So there's been something I've been seeing on social media, um, particularly Facebook, and it's pertaining to a guy. This I believe this is Pakistan, and there's a guy going viral for running down on homeless people and detaining them. And at first I had an opinion about it that was unfavorable, for you seeing this, and then you're like, why are they um exploiting these people? There's a way to do things in a positive light, and then there's also a way to do things in a negative light. So I've seen it, in a negative light because of how the operation is being conducted. His operation is called, I believe, the Grand Operation by Hyderabad Police Against Drug Addicts. So they consider these people to be drug addicts as opposed to just being homeless. But they're they're being um, targeted for being marginalized and living on the streets. You would see them on accounts just running down on people and detaining them. But at the same time, you see this particular person, I believe his name is um, Eunice, I mean, and I've seen things that were good, as far as him taking a stance against the homelessness and the people that are victims of certain things. But you also have to understand the victimization of people and how others profit off of them. you know but I've stated that you see his approach, then you check out his demeanor and how you're going about addressing a situation. I've seen that particular instance where he broke bread with um, those people and ate with them. That was admirable. That was commendable. And but we also have to take note that our current day and age, a lot of things is about going viral, and in us going viral, we tend to exploit others. And exploiting others, is a form of capitalizing off of others, the misfortune of others or the condition of others. And these things are used to gain popularity. If it wasn't for these particular people, these people with these conditions, then we wouldn't know who this particular person is. But we see that he's going viral on the premises of him supplying aid to these people, which, like, again, this is a good thing. And not only that, it's this is an Islamic country. Pakistan is Islamic. So as that being an Islamic country, it has to be ran Islamically. Like the same thing I stated about, United States becoming a Christian nation. It would have to be ran off of Christian principles, you know. So not just the majority of people being Christians, and this is just the a badge that I wear, and I'm right in my religion and you're wrong if you're not this, then we don't, that's that's a form of tyranny, to impose a religion and have outcasts and restrict other religions, So I believe that Pakistan, even though that it's a Islamic country, it still has um, tolerance for other religions. What I believe, we have to get into that, but I do see that, this guy, you would think that you would hope that they're fighting drugs, you know, in this particular operation. This Eunice Amin's grand operation. Is it right or wrong? So this is what the people want to, decide. Is his approach to addressing their drug problem or their homeless problem, is it right or is it wrong? And if you're on the outside looking in, and like me, for instance, I'm not in that country, so I really don't know the gravity of the situation. So I really can't, decide in that country, from that country's standpoint, if his actions are right or if it's wrong. But being that I'm on social media and I'm exposed to, seeing this on social media, you are able to formulate an opinion. And because you are one, with a sound mind, and or you believe that you have a sound mind, and you do have the ability to, speak on certain things, because you can. If I did not, then, if God didn't give me the heart to speak on certain things, to weigh them out, which is what you call righteous judgment, to see if anything is wrong, then you would shy away from it. If it's right, you would, applaud that and say, righteous, that's good work, that's you know that's commendable, for you to be seen in that light. So we want to know if this is a publicity stunt, for the purpose of going viral, to exploit others for the purpose of going viral, and this would come in, targeting a particular people. And is it to expose others, how to go about, addressing problems and taking, action upon yourself to do to have corrective measures, that you would take the measures to correct the situation on your own. And that goes into Islamic law. And Islamic law, is similar to, Christian law, and their belief in how they are to do certain things and act on behalf of, God, in doing certain things. So they believe that what you have is a hadith. A hadith is like scripture, and that supports doing certain things. And you would see it here. The 40th hadith of An Nawawi. And like I said, in my travels, you encountered Islam, you've encountered Judaism, you encountered Christianity, and these are things that are important aspects. Our faith and our religious beliefs are important aspect of our current stance, our current state of existence as humankind is concerned. And it's very, like I said, faith is something that's very important as far as, people's concerned. So what this state is, this is on the authority of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. May Allah be pleased with him. May God be pleased with him. I heard the messenger of Allah say, whosoever of you sees an evil, let him change it with his hands. If he is not able to do so, then let him change it with his tongue. If he is not able to do so, then with his heart. And that is the weakest of faith. Faith it has certain levels of faith. If you can have the ability to change something with your hands, then you take it upon yourself, to change it, for the sake of God, for the sake of Allah. You would change things with your hands. If it's evil, you would change it with your hands to make it right. And if you can't change it with your hands, you change it with, speaking out against it. I mean, if it's evil or it's an injustice and, you're silent about it, then you don't have the ability to, if you can do so, then you don't have the ability to approach or to address anything evil. But if you are not able to do that, you change it with your heart. You change it, what we call prayer. Prayer, they believe that prayer changes things. So if you see something wrong and you take it within your heart to say, that's sad, and I pray for you. You change it in that manner. Like the more people that pray on it, you believe that is a way that you can actually change a situation. So amongst those, even though that's faith, they would call that the weakest of faith, to see situations and just, pray on them, and that, pray that, time allows things to change on its own, but when you take it upon yourself to change things with your hands, that is like, the paramount to all of the others, so what you see him doing is taking it upon himself to, correct the situation out there, so this is something that's required as a part of their faith. So do we say that this is exploitation, or is it, appropriate for them to round up people and, usher them off? But I've seen him, clean up the people and bring them back to, a upright or erect position, from being downtrodden to being a, to being placed in, situations where they are, presentable and at one with their faith. These are Muslim people, so you would want to allow them to, not have to live below their means, especially when you can provide support for them. So I've seen that, I've seen that, and I've also seen, this particular, video as well. Like I said, I see his character, and he doesn't seem like he's a wicked person. It seems like he's trying to help, address the situation. but is it at the expense of exploiting those that aren't you know aren't well, that are in certain situations? Does it come at that expense? So and other people are making this is what he's showing here. Other people are making videos like what he's doing, and they're exploiting you know him for doing what he's doing, and he finds it you know um it's hilarious to him. And like I said, he doesn't strike me as one with ill intent, but it would be ill if it's just the exploitation thing. So this is what we have to be um, aware of. The ability for people to go viral, and the exploitation of people, and how others benefit from the living conditions of people that are marginalized, and being a victim themselves, and profiting off the victimization of others. So that is the purpose of this particular um, thing that I'm referencing to. you know but this is another thing that I wanted to show you was al wala wal bara. When in your travels you came across that saying, and it's a concept, and it is for you to be to show loyalty and disavow, which signifies loving and hating what God loves. And this is the same thing in Christianity. You're supposed to love what God loves and hate what God hates. So if God doesn't agree with certain things, then you shouldn't agree with it as well. But you know, when it comes to drug usage and poverty, and the marginalized, and these are things that you are to address. You are to address these things, especially if you're in a position to address them. You know, and it refers to holding fast to all that is pleasing to God, and withdrawing from and opposing all that is displeasing to God for the sake of God. You know, this is for the calling towards something other than submission to God, whether on purpose or nature of disbelief. So that is one thing, that if you're submitting to a drug per se, or anything other than drug, it could be another person. You're submitting to anything other than the will of God. So if you're submitting to a drug, that is adverse to loyalty to God. So you have more loyalty to a drug than you do to God, and that's one thing that you acknowledge in that situation. Like the people, they say that they're drug users, and they're trying to clean up the 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 community, or just the state itself. Because when you do go and you get into who this particular person is, who is Yunus Amin, the man leading the grand operation in Karachi. So you would see that These days, some videos are going viral on social media showing a man suddenly appearing on the streets of Karachi, shouting about a grand operation and taking drug addicts away with police officers. You know, so we this is what I've seen, and I didn't understand it, and it was kind of puzzling. Like, yo, why is they, you know, running on the streets and just grabbing people and just ushering them away? So you did see that, and it drew attention to who this particular person is. It drew attention, and because you do have knowledge that it was other foreign leaders that were, targeting drug addicts and drug dealers alike, and they was um, imposing harsh judgment on them, and we're referencing to Duterte, and when Duterte um, exacted his justice, his form of justice, that was um, commendable by President Trump at the time. Donald Trump was the president at that particular time, and he gave him um, a pat on the back for the way that he handled his drug problem, and being that you acknowledge a person that handled things like that with extra judiciary practices of carrying out certain you know acts that was violations to human rights. You have to question the mindset of the person that's giving him pats on the back and all sorts of praise for the way that he handled his situation, of this guy, and some say that he's a war criminal, and he's been brought to the courts on these particular acts, you know. So we have to understand that not everybody has the same approach to addressing their drug issues and their homeless problems, and some some come with fear and others come with love and how to solve the problem. you know so what I did see with this particular person, he handled it. He's trying to go about it in a just manner and put it on public display for people to maybe follow suit in the way that he's going about it, forcefully removing drug addicts from off the street and cleaning them up forcefully, you know and because it's required of him by his faith that he can do so. These are Muslim people. You know, he shared that many addicts have worms in their heads because he cuts their hair. So first they shave their heads, give them a bath, and dress them in clean clothes. So they give them baths and they dress them in clean clothes. He also said that if we want to save the new generation from drugs, then families must understand who their children are spending time with and why they are coming home late at night. If they are around bad company, they will surely move towards drugs. Eunice warned that the most dangerous drug nowadays is ice, followed by crystal, which is destroying young people. He said he is now very well known because of his videos, and sometimes he has to change his appearance to go outside. Like I said, the viral sensation is something that appeals to people that want some form of recognition, whether it's local or global. So viral videos do make you a certain sensation, and it brings forth attention, whether it's wanted attention or unwanted attention, and people are more um, recognizable of you if you were unrecognized before. So sometimes he would have to, if he wants to carry these operations, he would have to disguise himself. And I seen him in a disguise one time, which led me to believe that, this was all a ruse, or maybe for fame and attention, a person has moved to do these particular things. So this is what we want to come to grips with. Is this just or unjust? And is this a unethical treatment of people, or is it justified by his particular faith, and those particular people's faith? When you see them get cleaned up and brought back to an honorable level, and bringing them into prayer and allowing Islam to save them from the streets, is that something that we can say that's justifiable, you know and glory to God for that. So he shared a story that once he went to a place with many homeless people, and as soon as they saw him, they ran away in panic, thinking he would catch them. He said that drug dealers and their helpers are the ones most affected by his grand operations. Some of them are spreading videos of drug addicts online and even sending him death threats. In the end, Yunus Amin requested everyone to protect the young generation from the curse of drugs, which has become a serious disease in society. And, drugs do become a disease, and it plagues not just, their country, but other countries. And all countries, because of the existence of drugs, have experienced some form of drug addiction, and how it's a growing epidemic in societies from one side of the world to the other. And that was something that you wanted to point out. you know you wanted to point that out. you know and again, you have this guy mimicking him, and he sees it, and he sees it as it being jocular. you know but I do want to also you know indicate that we all know what the symbol this symbol actually means. you know People of Sukkur demand grand operation like Karachi call for crackdown on thieves, drug addicts, and criminals to restore peace. So basically, it's the people that actually demand that, or they say that, you know. But we've seen these type of operations before, and we are seeing them, again today. You know, he does that. See, you see them bringing them back into faith, and he likes that, and he's always happy, for the people. He's kind of, doesn't seem too warm about his circumstances, but you know, you know, God knows best if this is the right um, method or approach to take, and you know, me personally, I see, that's good. That you have people, to move like that. To clean up their communities and you know, you know. So here they're having discussion whether he's a hero or a villain. Being that there's debate about that. Maybe there's two ways to look at it. But what I did see when I I went to check out the history of Pakistan was, the influence of um, Freemasonry and their presence in Pakistan. And, Freemasons have a presence throughout everywhere because, they have signs and symbols of recognition. And I'll probably get into that to show you, symbols and signs of recognition and how they are, shown and why they are shown. Because, like I said, it's a societal thing. It's their society and their way of communicating um, what it actually is. Even this particular thing right here is something that they tend to, like this guy, see right there, they tend to use this particular thing, but they don't even use it in the way that they're supposed to. See, these particular um, your fingertips, they have um, nerve endings and they pulsate, and it creates an energy field, and I'm not sure if they know that, but that's what it is. And it's sync. It puts you in, you know balance with your whole body, and it makes you at peace just by you allowing your blood to flow, in a calm fashion. It's the reason why you might hear a difference in, my tone. And when I'm speaking, and doing this, I'm able to, you know, um, be in harmony. My whole body is in harmony. And this is the reason why I do it. I'm not sure what their purpose is, but if you can put your fingertips together and be still, you can feel, you know, it's pulsating. You feel, it's a calming feeling. You know, but yeah, I'm not sure what their whole means of doing it is, but they do have these particular networks, and let's see, they say they ousted them. You know, you know, Lahore Masonic Temple in the Charing Cross neighborhood of Lahore, Pakistan, is the former home of Prince Albert Victor Lodge. So we do have lodges and things in Pakistan, and all throughout, like I said, it's all throughout the course of the world that we did have, you know, their influence. So when we have agenda-based influences and ways to carry out certain things, are they genuine, and do they have a genuine purpose, or is it a part of, a tactic used to um, carry out certain um, things, or like agendas that they want to carry out? Who knows what the end result of that operation is? But as far as population control and trying to reduce certain populations, they have to target certain groups of people, and it's the people on the outskirts and the marginalized, or the ones that they call the bottom feeders. They become targeted and victims of those operations. So we want to get into, you know, what it means. This is one of their grand lodges in Pakistan. So Pakistan is not unfamiliar with masonry and their um, influence on that culture. So that becomes, when you're that, your religious affiliation becomes secondary, because now you associate yourself with something that's contrary to your religious beliefs. And one of the biggest sins in Islam, not even the biggest, the most um, uh, um, the worst sin in Islam is to make anything associated with God. That's the biggest sin in the world, you know. Um, just like in Christianity, it's denying the Holy Spirit, is kind of like the biggest sin in Christianity. So we do have them both having certain things that you really can't, do as that. So let's see. We want to see, what how Christ and Muhammad, you know, which they become the founders of these religions, how they addressed certain situations when it comes to the marginalized, because they both was adverse to the mistreatment of the vulnerable, and exploitation of, you know, certain people. And what exploitation is, um, to exploit someone means to unfairly or selfishly take advantage of them, often for one's own benefit. So if the person that is making the videos of rounding up the homeless, and cleaning them up, which, like I said, it's something that is it's something that you know you give acknowledgement of, that's a righteous act, but if it's to selfishly take advantage of them for one own's benefit, then that is something that you have to, what I mean, you may have to address, to shed light on, so that maybe they do it correctly, and do it not for personal gain, but actually for religious, or a faith-based thing, and even just speaking about it, is a way for you to bring awareness to the fact that those things can happen. When we show you the drug addicts in Philadelphia, and the people going around recording them, after they're high and passed out on the streets, and do um, we exploit them, or do we um, approach the situation without any kind of shedding any kind of light on the particular people, and just showing you the people, because these people, they are still people, you know and we might take advantage of them because of the situation that they are confronted with, which is um, a lowered state of existence. Even in a video that I put out, I seen a woman in I believe it was in Ross's parking lot when I was in Philly, and she was just bugging, like it was a drug that she was on. I didn't take the camera and go in front of her and talk to her and put the camera all in her face, and you know I didn't do that for the sake of, that is somebody, and, that particular person, you know, is not just somebody's daughter, somebody's sister, somebody's mom. It could be anybody, but you don't want to expose people, for your own benefit. You want to give people the wisdom of how to, you know, um, diffuse or calm a person, or to address a certain person when they're, being um, unruly, and they're being uh, um, there's eyes watching them, like children watching them, and you want to be the one because of um, the mindset that you have, which is, you're not doing it. You know better than to do it. So if you know better than to do it, then you have to pull the coat of others who might not know better than to do it. You know what I mean? So that is the purpose of why you was able to, approach and address that, because that's, like I said, it's a calling that we have, especially when it includes um, being human. When we're called to be human, so we have to take a human approach to everything. Is it, my nature to get on the phone, call the police? The police, yo, it's a woman out. No, you warn them. Like, yo, you go somewhere and chill out. You know what I mean? Calm down. There's people out here. There's children out here. You don't want to get locked up, because if you get locked up, then you're not going to be free. You know. So this is something that you you know what I mean. You're geared towards doing. You know. To That's the meaning of exploiting the poor, or exploiting someone. To exploit someone means to unfairly or selfishly take advantage of them, often for one own's benefit. One own's benefit today would be, to go viral, and going viral creates a livelihood for people. There's people that has made a living off of going viral, and because they made a living off of going viral, others see them making a living off of going viral, and they do things, to go viral, and whatever it is that's attention grabbing it, whether it's a negative thing or a positive thing. They don't necessarily have to be positive, to go viral. We see people going around feeding the homeless, and spreading that type of energy. But does that mean that they're not capitalizing off of, just being able to provide a meal for people that are less fortunate? Does that mean that they genuinely care, or are these people, you know, um, prompting themselves to go viral? Because we do see that, every time we come on my page, there's people, They're showing, you know, showing, you know what I mean? They're showing themselves. They're showing themselves, you know. And even when you go up here, I'm not sure how, but this particular person, you know, here is always something, you know, um, that appeals that appeals to the lustful. And when I'm not sure how I became a follower of this particular person, it says that I'm following him, but you know, this particular person goes viral, you know, and after he goes viral, he normally gives people money, you know, and it seems like he's doing the right thing, you know, by just giving people money and paying their groceries. But how much do you benefit off of that? You know, he's probably about to pay somebody's groceries right now, but this is a means of, you know, do he really care, or is this, you know, a gimmick for um, um, social media, you know, to go viral? You know, he you know, interviews the homeless, and you know, you know, yeah. But you know, this guy, he he makes all sorts of content, but maybe that's the reason why, you know, you end up. I don't really follow people, you know, especially when it's a viral thing, you know. But he normally makes this kind of content, you know, and this is pretty cool. He's gonna give her money, you know, but his money, you know, triples and quadruples that, you know, and you know, he always has the big boy cars and always talking about his cars, and you know, there's nothing wrong with that, you know. If that's the type of world we live in, you know, the type of world we live in, where you know our um, material success um, is what speaks for us, you know. This is him talking about his what's this called, Hellcat, I believe. I'm not sure. I don't even know what a Hellcat is, you know. But you know, the content he makes creates a livelihood for him. So others, you know, would take that approach of, you know, putting this type of content out and, you know, seeking to go viral, you know. This is what I see, you know, a lot of people in a rush to go viral, you know. But this is just weird, you know. But yeah, social media is a hodgepodge of, you know, all sorts of um, things, you know, and you know, do you withdraw from it, you know, and just let things be what it is, or do you, you know, be one that sees what goes on social media and um, address things as you see fit, you know? So that is part of what you're actually, you know, getting at, basically, you know. So we can go back to, you know, what we need to get to, you know, is it's over here. So let's see. Uh, again, so this is just how you understand the comparison between both um, religious figures, Jesus and both Prophet Muhammad. And both Jesus and Muhammad, while revered religious figures, encountered and addressed marginalized groups in their respective societies. Jesus, as depicted in the Gospels, interacted with and showed compassion for the poor, sick, the Samaritans, women, and those considered outcasts. Similarly, Prophet Muhammad, according to Islamic tradition, cared for the vulnerable, including the poor, racial minorities, orphans, and widows. So, Jesus and marginalization. Jesus' ministry focused on reaching those on the fringes of society, challenging social norms of the time. According to some interpretations of the Gospel of Mark, he associated with and healed those deemed unclean or ill, such as lepers and the demon possessed. He interacted with and showed compassion for women, who often held a marginalized position in Jewish society. His parables and teachings often reflected a concern for the poor and oppressed. So that is, in a nutshell, who was the main, the focal point of, the ministry of Christ, and who Christ had compassion for, those particular people. And then you have Muhammad and marginalization. Prophet Muhammad's teachings emphasize social justice and the importance of caring for the vulnerable. His early followers included slaves, the poor, and those from marginalized communities. Islamic tradition highlights his concern for orphans, widows, and those facing poverty or social disadvantage. He actively worked to uplift and empower these groups through social and economic reform. So, you know, these things in, the book, in their particular books respectively, the Bible and the Quran, they they work towards social and economic reform for, the orphans, widows, those facing poverty and social disadvantages. And all these people would be categorized as marginalized. So similarities, both figures challenged the social norms of their time by interacting with and showing compassion for marginalized people. And you do see that um, um, Eunice Amin is interacting with and showing compassion for, those particular people, you know, and this is the reason why you don't you don't cast or pass any kind of judgment on any of those people. The people that's, giving money to the homeless and going around feeding or paying for groceries because they're interacting with them. And it would make you, adverse to those actions by speaking against it. So you don't speak against it, but you do acknowledge that some people, do it for, you know, their own selfish benefits, which, is a form of exploitation. So do we, you know, accuse people of exploitation, or do we say, these people, even, the acts in Philadelphia, this is the reason why you can't even speak against those, because we don't know the hearts of these particular people. Only thing we know is the action, the intent of these people may be, different from what we actually see. So they both emphasize the importance of caring for the poor and vulnerable, and they're not saying that you have to genuinely care for them, but you have to take some sort of interest in caring for them, whether you're in a position not to or you're in a position to do it. We would rather see, the rich, whether for their own personal interests, give to the poor as opposed to the rich, because they are, not um, focused on that, give them anything at all. So we would rather see people do things for their own personal interests as opposed to you know, just undermine the whole, ordeal in itself. You know, their teachings and actions offered a message of hope and inclusion to those on the fringes of society. You know, so in essence, both Jesus and Muhammad, while distinct figures in their respective faith, shared a common thread of concern and actions towards the marginalized within their societies, according to some interpretations of their lives and teachings. So, those are, you know, the, you know, the similarities between them. And this is the reason why we have to, put differences aside, when we have religious diversity, people being in diverse religions, not believing that they can get together and, carry out the will of God, being that they're in two different or three different walks of faith. So this goes into Isaiah, when Isaiah speaks about the wolf lying down with the lamb. This is what that means, that those with adverse interests can come together and agree. They can actually put their differences aside and join hands, join forces to become one. So this is where we're trying to get at, when it comes to these particular faiths and these particular religious movements, because we still see the warring back and forth with Iran and Israel, and America taking sides, and not coming to a realization that, hey, bro, we're supposed to be representatives of God, and we're being more representatives of destruction, and keeping an ongoing conflict that should have been eradicated a long time ago. We keep adding fuel to the fire. So do we really adhere to these particular teachings, or are we adhering to our own hearts, which are destructive, and the nature of our destruction overrides the nature of the righteousness of the teachings that we have, which is the Bible, which is the Quran, which is the Torah, which is all these religions that we have, that can help humanity and give us moral, um, you know, a moral um, approach to certain things? Do we allow, our hearts to still, you know, set us off on destruction? So, you know, yeah, you wanted to, touch on that, because we did see, we have Trump today, saying that they're cracking down on, their homeless problem, and we're trying to see the method in which Trump is going to exact rectification on that. Like, how is Trump going to approach that? In what fashion? Being that, Trump is Christian. But U.S. President Donald Trump has said homeless people must move out of Washington, D.C. as he vows to tackle crime in the city. But the mayor pushed back against the White House, likening the American capital to Baghdad in Iraq. The Republican president has also trailed a news conference for Monday about his plan to make the city safer and more beautiful than it ever was before. A Democrat said, "We are not experiencing a crime spike." Like I said, his actions could be that, we're taking over the city from a Democrat, and we just have to, be watchful. And not just be watchful, but again, if we can, change things, we should take the initiative to do it, with our hands or speak about it, you know, before we allow the national police to come and change our hoods and change our communities. Maybe we should, take it upon ourselves to change our communities and clean up our neighborhoods, which is really nothing. We could take a day, day off, maybe a Friday, and just contribute that to beautifying our cities, in our states or wherever we live, and then the Sabbath is the next day. We can rest on those days, and then start the week off again on Sunday, but that's just you being optimistic, about how things can change and the way that people approach certain situations. But again, we've seen this particular person. Like I said, I didn't see any kind of ill coming from him. Like his will, I didn't see any ill will coming from his approach. Which I'm not saying I read people, but I can read people, and you can sense the spirit of people. And I've seen enough of him to, say that he's a jolly person. He's a jolly person. You have to be, when you're jocular and jovial, you are a jolly person. You have a, you're funny. You have when you're jocular, you have the spirit of good in order for you to be jocular. So you have a good spirit, to be one that makes light of jokes aimed towards you. So that's just something I felt like touching upon, because I seen it, and I wanted to give a little bit of insight into what it is that a lot of people are not saying, or not doing about certain things. It's his actions. We'll see what happens to Pakistan. Let's see how the drug crisis, if there's a drug crisis in Pakistan, let's see how his movement addresses those problems. And in the months to come, we will see how Trump's his method approaches the homelessness, the drugs, the crime. We'll see. That's the only thing we can do is either see or be active in the change. Again, you can change things with your hands, or you can change it with your tongue. You change it with your tongue by speaking out against it. You change it in your heart by praying about it. So we'll pray about certain situations, or we'll speak out against certain situations, or either we'll take the initiative, on ourselves, to go and change the situation. So, you know, I just wanted to share that because it needed to be shared. And, I'm not passing judgment on anybody in particular, especially if this guy's doing a great thing and doing it on, um, a public scale and not being secretive about it, and his 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 um his intentions are genuine and good, then that's you know if that's something that you want to you know commend a person for, you know you want to you know you want to be you know we don't give praise and applaud, but we commend. I mean, things that you do that's commendable. His approach is more commendable, than um, Duarte's Duterte's approach. Let's see, you know, his approach is more commendable than this particular person's approach. You know, and like I said, they are all, one and the same. Being that they have this particular, you know, influence. Because we can also see here that, I believe Manny Pacquiao is Philippines, but he's a Freemason. But Philippines is not unaware or unfamiliar with Freemasons and Freemason practice. So, you know, Freemasonry in the Philippines has a rich history dating back to mid 1800s, playing a significant role in the country's quest for independence and social reform. So they do have, Masonic influence over there. So a lot of things that are done covertly are done, with you know a certain society that has always played a role in unrolling or unleashing certain things, or constructing certain things and destroying certain things. So even with the Philippines, there's so much poverty, and let me just show you. Um, you know, just just the slums and stuff. Slums in the Philippines. These people are there. Their presence is there, but is their spirit there? You know, these are builders. You know, these are builders. Are we building? You know what I mean? Are we building, or are we doing more destruction than building? We have, like, again, we have no problem with them if they want to do the right thing. But if we're not doing the right thing, then, what are we doing? That's no difference than, a Christian that wouldn't adhere to Christ, and that's no difference than a Muslim that wouldn't adhere to Prophet Muhammad, so alayhi wasallam. That's no different than an Israelite that doesn't follow, Moses, or that turns away from Moses and start worshiping idols. It's no different than any of those. So if there's builders present in your communities and your states and your cities, and they're not building, but they're allowing destruction to be, you know, the the existence, then, you know, what are they doing? You know, what are they doing? You know, so if these people have the tools to build and they have a presence anywhere and everywhere, and they're not building, what are they doing? You know, so I just wanted to share that because it needed to be shared, and hopefully, you know, that didn't come off as, you know, that's just my input of what I see, you know, in my opinion. You know, my opinion doesn't have to be, you know, um, favored, but it's still my opinion. Because again, I'm amongst the living. So, peace.